Hi everybody, my name is Moses Sparks. I'm a professional wildlife photographer. I'm here for Sammy's Camera, and we're coming to you from the San Jacinto Wildlife Area. I have used the Sony A1 cameras since they were introduced. I bought a pair of those cameras and hauled them all over the world, shooting all different kinds of wildlife in all different sorts of environments. I thought what we would talk about today are some of the key differences between the new A1 II and the original A1. Because if you are looking at reviews and YouTube videos, you'll hear a lot of talk about some of the headline features that everybody wants to discuss, but there's a lot more to it than that. The cameras really had a complete redesign, and everything in it just works better and faster now. One of the things that I've been really impressed with is the improvement to autofocus, and specifically eye autofocus and tracking. Both seem to be greatly improved. Eye autofocus now locks onto subjects at a much greater distance, and it seems to be a lot stickier to me, meaning that it hangs on to that target as it moves around. Tracking is also, it's definitely better. I just returned from a trip to Canada photographing owls in the forest, and I've got sequences of images of owls flying in and out of trees with tree trunks passing in front of them. And the autofocus just hangs on to it. And every frame that I got was just tack sharp. That's definitely an improvement over the A1. Another thing about the camera that is remarkably better to me, it's the feel of the camera. The grip has been enlarged and it just feels better in your hand. I use a pair of these cameras, and the way that I like to use them is to have a battery grip on one of the bodies and no grip on the other. And one of the things that I've always appreciated about Sony cameras is, rather than having a big, huge, bulky body that you have to carry that weight and that bulk around all the time, these cameras, you can scale them up, like this one with the grip, to double the battery capacity and give you a bigger camera to hang on to for using big telephoto primes like this. Or you can scale them down, and makes it a lot easier to pack a couple of these cameras into a small backpack and travel with them. That's a big deal to me. And that obviously, it decreases the weight of the cameras as well. And when you're flying, weight gets to be a big deal sometimes. Some of the other features on the camera that are really fantastic is this flip screen. And this is something you've probably heard a lot about, but the fact that this guy can move in any direction, it means that you can get the camera down low and you can shoot horizontal. But you can also get the camera down low and you can shoot vertical and still compose right on this thing. That means hanging this thing out of something like a safari vehicle on a monopod, but still being able to see your screen and compose your pictures. That's something you really just could not do with the A1. So that's a big deal. That's a big improvement. Image stabilization on the camera has gone from about 5 stops to 8.5 stops. And you will begin to understand what a major advancement that is when you look through the camera, you touch the shutter release, and you see that image that's being greatly magnified by your big wildlife lens. It just becomes rock solid. It makes it so much easier to compose your image. And of course, it makes it easier to get sharp pictures because the camera is helping to offset that natural movement that's going to happen when you're holding a big camera and lens. All of the buttons have been redesigned along with the grip. So the buttons they're bigger, they're easier to reach. When I'm shooting, I just don't take the camera away from my face, right? I want to be able to see what's happening at all times, and these just make it that much easier for me to change all my crucial settings without ever looking away from the viewfinder. The camera has also got some new focus areas in it. So you've got all of the same ones that were there in the A1 camera, but now something that a lot of Sony shooters have been asking for a long time. There's an extra small spot focus area. And that thing is so useful. you can use that to just thread the needle, put your focus point in between branches and grass and leaves and things in front of your subject and still get it on the face, on the eyes of the subject that you're trying to shoot. That's very, very useful. The other thing that they've included now are custom AF areas. You can build your own. So I keep one on my cameras. It's a tall, rectangular area right in the center of the viewfinder. And when you've got an animal, some kind of a mammal running directly at the camera, you now have a focus area that'll completely cover that animal and ignore everything to the right and left of the animal. That's really cool. Okay, let's talk about pre-capture a little bit, because that's something new on this camera. That is one of the headline features a lot of people are talking about, but there's a reason for that. It's a real game changer for wildlife photographers and specifically for bird photographers. Sort of going hand in hand with that, there is a new custom button on the camera. It's right on the front. It's a C5 button. I have always wished that there was one more custom button on here. I seem to run out of programmable buttons with the way I like to configure the camera. Well, now it's got it. And this button by default is set up for pre-capture. That's what I use it for. And so what pre-capture is, if you're not familiar with it, when you turn that on, the camera begins to record frames. As soon as you touch the shutter release button, it begins to record images, but it doesn't write them to your memory card. It writes them to the buffer of the camera. And if you continue pushing the shutter release down and the shutter fires, all of those images that it's already recorded are written to the memory card, as well as the ones following that pre-capture sequence. And what that lets you do, when you're watching a bird, it's on a perch, and you expect that that bird is going to fly. One of those pictures that bird photographers dream about getting is the bird right as it launches from its perch, and all of those different wing positions. And most of the time, you're only looking for one of those pictures, but you want the perfect picture. You want the one where the wings are in just the right place. But doing that even with the A1 camera, which was the fastest camera of its kind on the market, it's still just about impossible. And it's because the bird's reaction time is over 20 times faster than yours is. And that means that by the time you start shooting those pictures, often the bird was already completely out of the frame. Well, as soon as I touch the shutter release now with pre-capture on, it begins capturing those frames. And if I follow through and shoot it, I've got all of those frames to choose from. And this was just such a fantastic tool to have photographing owls, because we would watch the owls on a perch, they'd be hunting, they would see some prey and jump off of a branch to go get that prey. And I got every one of those pictures. So I've got long sequences of images of the bird leaving the perch, flying through the air, and I've got every one of the different wing positions, so I can choose the perfect image. That's really a game-changing feature. Weather sealing on this camera is improved. Sony, like most camera manufacturers, does not publish an IP rating, but I've already had this camera out in rain and snow, not always with the opportunity to protect it with some kind of a cover. It's just been flawless. It just doesn't care. So it seems to work very well in that. One thing that's probably worth mentioning is that when you use the battery grip now on this camera, they've redesigned the power draw. It used to be that two batteries in here, the camera would draw down battery number 1, and then it would draw down battery number 2. Well, now it sees them and it pulls power in parallel. And Sony says that that increases the battery capacity, meaning you get more life out of a set of batteries. And I definitely saw that to be true, because shooting in extreme cold, your batteries are going to die faster anyway. And so the grip was a real asset to me. I could shoot all day on a single pair of batteries, never had to change batteries, never had to worry about running out of juice at a crucial moment. And another feature that is new on this camera that differentiates it from the original A1 is this camera now has speed boost. I keep my camera set to shoot at 30 frames a second all the time. And then I just control that just like the throttle on a car. I don't hold this down and shoot 30 frames per second. I shoot it in short bursts, and I'm able to control it very well that way. But some people just don't want to be generating all those images every time they shoot. So now you can utilize speed boost, and you program that to a button, one of your custom buttons, of which you have a bunch now. And you can set the camera to shoot at, say, 5 frames a second, 10 frames a second. And then when you hit speed boost, you can jump right to 30 frames a second for peak moments of action. That's a really useful feature. And the other thing that they've done that I really like, on the drive mode dial, on the A1, it was a 2-step process to change your frame rate or your drive mode or put it in self-timer mode. You have to push this center lock button and you have to turn the dial at the same time. Well, now there's a new setting on here. It's this little star icon. And when you set that, now I can control the frame rate from the touch screen. I can simply touch it and I can put the camera into any of those frame rates right there, right? And it's just faster and more intuitive to me than having to use this dial. You can still use the dial. So if you're used to that way of working, you still have that option, but this is new. Okay, so I hope that gives you some insight into some of the important differences between the A1 and the A2. I have seen a fair number of people online saying, oh, it's a minor upgrade, not sure that it's really worth it. I have to think those people have not actually put their hands on this camera because it's anything but minor. Every single thing in the camera just works faster and works better. And if you're shooting something like wildlife, it's very unpredictable. Any advantage that you can get, that means you're gonna come home with more pictures that you're happy about. You're gonna wanna hang on your wall. Trust me, that is a good thing. You can try the A1 II, you can rent the A1 II, and you can purchase the A1 II at any of the Sammy's camera locations. And I just can't imagine anybody not being utterly thrilled with what this camera can do for you. So this is Moses Sparks for Sammy's Camera, and see you in the next one.